mystery and horror, the air itself is filled with monsters.
Children of the night, what music they make. He's alive! He's alive!
Oh, for the first time in 2024, welcome all you monster fiends, and thank you for joining us for another deep dive, factoid-filled episode exploring Hollywood's most famous monsters. I am your mistress of ceremonies, Sam, and I'm joined, as always, by Dan from Bleeding Marvelous. Say hello, Dan.
Hello, Dan.
Oh, we're in season 2.
And I'm in HD.
It's Dan!
I'm no longer on a potato.
And it's season 2!
Deuces.
Oh my god. It feels like a lifetime ago since we've done this.
Yeah, because we finished a lot earlier than the guys got the... Did we? Oh, I don't remember.
We finished at the end of
November,
beginning
yeah.
of December, maybe.
Something like that. Somewhere in November.
So we've had a little break. We've recharged our batteries somewhat. Some of us have been sick.
Yes, very.
We still are. And we are back. And somebody pointed out to me in the Discord the other day that we started this whole thing with a huge universal monster. We are once again starting season 2 with another huge universal monster. And I didn't even put 2 and 2 together, and I thought, wow, yeah, I like that. That was not by design at all.
Don't know who you mean, Creature of the Black Lagoon. YouTube.
First episode's really good. And okay, so I'll do the intro. No, I will do the disclaimer. Because on the first episode, I didn't actually do the disclaimer. I did it
Not
on the
repeating
second
that.
one.
Yeah.
No. This is season 2, baby. We do things professional.
Do we? Will we?
You're going to find out.
Probably not.
Probably not. Everything discussed in today's episode is our opinions and our opinions alone. And if you'd like to discuss anything from this episode, please come and join us in the comment section, the Discord page, or the Facebook page, where we can have an open discussion. But what we won't have is anyone coming for us and telling us our opinions are wrong. We can all agree to disagree in fandom. So let's keep it fun, keep it kind, and keep the toxic behaviour out of nerdism. And for the first time of 2024, Dan?
Don't be a dick.
There we go. So if you didn't see on our Instagram, our new Instagram page,
Monsters Up North. Thank you.
Our TikTok page,
Monsters Up North. Thank you.
you will know that today's episode is none other than the main man himself. I'd say he's the main man of Universal Monsters, even though he kind of didn't start it. He boosted it a little bit. We're doing Dracula, but we're not just doing any Dracula. We're doing Bela Lugosi's Dracula. I like that. It's like me.
That might have been a clue.
I mean, yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, Dan's backdrop is a huge clue. But if you listen on audio, hey, goes out every Tuesday. Hey, shameless plug. So, in 1931, American pre-code supernatural horror directed by Todd Browning and starring Bela Lugosi, based on the 1924 stage play Dracula by Hamilton Dean and John L. Baldeston, which in turn is based on the 1987 novel by Bram Stoker. Carl Laemmle once presented the vampire thriller, but tonight, Monsters Up North brings you a nightmare of horror as we bring you Dracula. Dun, dun, dun.
Don't know how to put that.
I feel like I should have some lightning at some point. I need to get some effects in here, like that'd have been pretty cool at the end of that.
What sweet music they make.
Ah, that is such a good line. He delivers it so perfectly. So I mentioned in the intro that it's based on the stage play, which I feel is very important to begin with,
Yes.
which is then based on the book. This is based on the stage play.
Yes. Yes. In part, but yes.
In parts.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot about this movie, and I, in turn, was starting to learn a lot about Bela Lugosi, which has made me want to explore him and his career in so much more detail. So I will try my best to curb as much as what I can, so we can put that in there.
I was going to say, I've covered like him with regards to Dracula, and then I've got a bit about his death, and that's it.
Yeah, I totally get that part. So my first interesting factoid is the movie didn't get a score, a musical score that is, until 1998.
Yeah, Philip Glass, wasn't it?
Yeah, so does the opening part with the Swan Lake, that's it. Has that always been in there, or was that part of that?
No, Swan Lake was always the opening because they like to have an atmospheric moment.
They thought Swan Lake was it?
Apparently so. It was all the rage. It was just like having, I don't know, WAP play, to start a film. But yeah, they reused it again for The Mummy.
Yeah, they did.
The Swan Lake intro. So, I mean, they got their money out of their rights, put it that way. When they bought something, they got their money's worth.
I just didn't know when I was looking into it. I couldn't find if it was part of that was added in 98, or was it always there?
In a lot of the old cinemas, they were. It was shown in like auditoriums. The cinemas, so they'd have the orchestra pit, and the orchestra would come play the first song to the music, and they go, because obviously there was no other music during the
because what you've got to remember is that this is coming off the back of silent movies.
Yeah, it was one of the first talkies, wasn't it?
It very much was. It was. Now, I love this. I love what I learned here, because we had a running joke in the first series about Boris Karloff being picked for everything over everyone else.
Yes.
Now, this movie is not that at all.
No.
At all. This movie was actually wrote for Lon Chaney in mind.
Yeah.
And he said no. And I've read a lot of things where people said, regardless of what had happened, he probably could not have done it anyway. But the reason he said no for is because he was really poorly, and he died halfway during the production of this movie.
Yeah.
They were literally, Universal were going to put their whole stock on Lon Chaney as being their poster boy.
Yeah, because of the Phantom and because of Hunchback, obviously, and him being a master of disguise. Yeah. And those they were the two first horror movies prior. There we go, that's the word. Prior to this one. So yeah.
So yeah, everything was going to fall on Lon Chaney's shoulders, but he died in 1930. This came out in 1931, so this was halfway through production, and the impact of his death rattles through this movie, because Todd Browning did not take it very well at all. No. Todd Browning, the director of Freaks, which I know the movie Freaks.
Yes.
I know the name Todd Browning. I did not put two and two together.
We hopefully will be covering that movie at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it is a masterclass in deception and the art of making you think something over here is happening, but it's actually not. There's an underlying current of something happening over here, and you're ready to believe that those are the bad guys when it's not them. And it is very cleverly done.
It's a masterpiece of horror, of cinema. It is. If you go onto any horror list, Freaks is always up there. Yeah. But why I did not put, and I know Todd Browning's name because it's Todd Browning Presents Freaks. I know this, why I did not put them together. I even wrote it down. Sam, Todd Browning directed Freaks. So yes, he took the death of Lon Chaney incredibly bad, to the point where cinematographer Carl Freud,
yeah, something like Freud. I want to say it's Freud or something like that. It's not quite Freud
had to step in and direct, because Todd Browning was either off his face, not interested, And that has such a detrimental effect on everything to do with this movie. So we class this movie, I mean, it scored 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, and we class this movie as an absolute masterpiece. But is it really that big of a masterpiece when you break it down?
If you see some of the videos I watched with regards to this that were done by like movie scholars and guys that run like they're like professors at schools and stuff like that, they would say yes. For the cinematography, the use of shadows, the colorization of it just being black and white and grey and being able to use those colors to such an effect. But if you ask some of the others, they said it's badly acted. It was a rush job because it was filmed in 7 weeks.
The scene's missing.
Yeah, well, over half an hour's missing, isn't it?
Yeah, there's footage missing that didn't get added into the final cut. It was said on set the only person who ever took this project seriously was Bela Lugosi himself.
Yeah.
So Bella's such an interesting person. He really, really is. But the movie itself, if I just go back to it before I start jumping into Bella, because I will not fucking stop. I am bored and to death with this today. It's got there's plot lines that are not tied up. Lucy's been one of them.
Yeah.
There is scenes that don't make any sense with regards to Renfield and Dracula. There is so much taken out. Now, apparently these scenes that were to complete the movie are actually still there. Just nobody wants to, because I think the license now on Dracula is like gone. Like it's free for all. His image can be used. So I don't think money-wise they would make anything from it. But they do exist somewhere.
I know that if you watch, because a lot of people don't know this, but at the same time, simultaneously, the Spanish speaking one was filmed, which was a first of its kind. You know, the fact that they'd actually filmed the entire same movie in Spanish with different fluent Spanish actors.
Yeah, there is some of the original taken from it and put in. I have learned so much about this movie today.
But that runs 30 minutes longer than the original because they kept a lot of the scenes in. Because Carl Laemmle didn't have a say. For some reason, he didn't have a say so much over the Spanish-speaking one as he did over the English-speaking, because he was the one that wanted a lot of the things cut down, cut out. He said it made it sick. He hated the noises that Dwight Frye made when he died, and the same with Bella when he dies.
Yeah.
He hated the screams. He said they were a bit too erotic or a bit too disturbing, and they made him sick to his stomach, and he just didn't like them. So he wanted them either toned down or the scenes had to be cut.
It's so close to Todd Browning's vision that it could have been Todd Browning's movie. That's from one of the documentaries I watched today about this. I had no idea this was even a thing, this even existed. It scores 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
What, the Spanish-speaking one?
Spanish one. It was a thing that Universal wanted to try out. They wanted to, every movie that they did, they wanted it to be able to transcend into a different language. And they chose Spanish because there's a lot of people in America who speak Spanish. And there is still certain scenes, the opening scene, which is read by the delightful, oh my gosh, what's her name? Carla Laemmle. Yeah, that's still in there. The
first woman to ever speak in a horror movie. That's her credit.
And was the last surviving cast member. She died in 2014 at the age of 104.
Yes, she did.
Yes.
Yeah. So Carla Laemmle, his niece, obviously, because they like using the same name over and over again, clearly. Carl Sr., Carl Jr., and Carla.
Yes.
His niece, she was the first ever female to speak in a horror movie. I mean, imagine having that credit. And the fact that she lived to 104.
She outlived them all. Ooh. She outlived them all. She died 10 years ago. That's crazy. But yeah, so they still kept them bits in. But the one thing that really does its discredit is Carlos. Oh my God, I could say his name earlier today. Villaris, who is Dracula.
Right.
It's a very cartoonish version of Dracula.
Right.
When you put him up against Bella's, he does not stand a chance, because the one thing that this movie had that what they didn't have was Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
The one man who truly believed in this project so much that he did himself the massive disservice of cutting his wage. Something that will have haunted him for the rest of his fucking life. There is two big mistakes that Bela did in his life. The first one is the pay cut. He only got paid £500 a week. In comparison to David Mannins, who played Jonathan Harker, he was getting nearly £2,000 a week. And it was all because he just wanted to play this part so badly. He played him on stage. He actually played him in the stage show. This was his movie. And how he did a massive disservice to himself by only asking for $500 a week, because he really wanted to play Dracula. He'd played him on stage in the stage version of what the movie then became. And his co-star, David Mannins, who played Jonathan Harker, got $2,000 a week. This would be one of his first big downfalls, because studios then clicked onto the fact that Bela will do something for next to nothing. And he got next to nothing in every work he ever did after that.
Yep. The sad thing was he was fifth in line for the film as well. He was never going to be their first guy.
No, he wasn't. I did a write down.
Because we had Lon Chaney, who was originally the first choice. Then there was Lou Ayres, Robert Ames, and also David Manners, the guy who played Harker, was offered Dracula before Bela. So he ended up being fifth in line, but because he cut his pay and David wouldn't, they went with Bela. So
it set him, like, not to go into all of his other films, but it really set him up for failure, and studios took advantage of it.
I mean, he worked for the equivalent, for the 7-week shoot, he worked for the equivalent of $73,000 by today's standards. Back then, he only took home $3,500 for the whole 7-week run of shooting. Even Mina Harker was on more than he was. Mina, she took home, like, I think it ended up being nearer 80,000 by today's standards than he did. So, and for a woman to be on more than a man, back in them days, was something.
It's just so sad, and unfortunately, you get that a lot when you talk about Bela Lugosi, is just how sad things were for him. Because in Hungary, in his native land of Hungary, he was a fucking star. He was top bill. He was the actor of all actors. And unfortunately, sorry, someone's just buzzed my watch. How dare they? Unfortunately, he wanted to go to America, and Americans don't play the same as Hungary. I think he did like 103 films in Hungary before he even came to America. Yeah. Like, that's crazy. That is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it is that all of it is really peculiar, how we only know him as the original. Yeah, it was just purely by the fact that he was so eager. I wouldn't say desperate. I think desperate's the wrong word, but he was so eager, and because he knew the part back to front from playing him on the stage show, and with the fact that the stage show was originated in the UK, and it was at the West End, and it was Raymond Huntley who originally played it in the UK, but when they moved it to Broadway, the Americans said it needed more mystery, and they loved the air of the European idea of Dracula being more mystical, more sexy, more mysterious, by giving him that kind of just that more sexy look that we're used to, the seduction thing.
Yes.
So when they met with Bela for the audition for the stage show, they knew he was the man straight away, because obviously he'd already had the accent down because he's Hungarian. So there we go, the accent's there. I mean, whilst I know that's probably not a traditional Hungarian accent he uses in the movie,
no,
but he had an air of all those things that they wanted at the time. So he knew the role back to front. So when it came to being on the movie, he thought he was a shoo-in. In his head, he was like, of course, I know it back to front. Why wouldn't they ask me? And when they didn't, and he was going further and further down the list, he was like, how can I get to play my part? Because he considered it his part at that point.
Yeah, it was. And for all, is so well known for this iconic character, this creation, this look as well, all comes from him. The Widow's Peak, it's all him. He only ever played him twice.
Son of No, was it Abbott and Costello? Which one was it?
No, he didn't even do it in Abbott and Costello. It was
Son of Dracula. No, it wasn't that one, was it?
I wish I wrote it down now.
Blank. Yeah, I don't think I wrote that one down. They did. I did find out, but I haven't written it down.
I'm such an idiot. But yeah, he only ever played Dracula twice. The look, the Widow's Peak, is his own little take, like add on to it's. He does not have a Widow's Peak. He added it himself. Something that a lot of people like to point out when you're learning about the actual look of Dracula. Did you know? Here's an interesting one for you. Did you know that there was a certain actress considered for Mina Harker, but Carl Laemmle Jr. thought she had too much sex appeal, and this certain actress did have a Universal contract at the time. It was Bette Davis.
Really? No, I didn't know that one. Wow.
And Carl Laemmle Jr. did not think that she would bring what's the word?
Innocence. That's what they call. It's a very innocent air to her.
Yes.
And I can see why. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if Bette Davis had that, if she had that husky voice from day one, then Mina, totally different me. Lucy, absolutely. Yeah. But not Mina Harker. Yeah, Bette Davis was shortlisted for that. I was just going to say something and I've totally forgotten. US box office hit this was.
Yeah. Yeah, they
huge.
Yeah, they took the equivalent. They took 35,000. No, that was the budget. The budget was $35,500, which was the equivalent to 7.2 million today. But at the box office, it took 700,000 in 1931, which is the equivalent to 14 million this year. And I mean, you're talking 14 million in the height of the Depression.
The stock market? Was it the stock market
crash? Yeah.
In 1929.
It was the big depression in America. That's hence why they cut a lot of corners in this movie. Hence why the score wasn't done, because the money wasn't there, because they chose to invest it in the making of the film rather than the added extras, because they were worried that people wouldn't come. They didn't want to spend too much money on it, even though Carl Jr. was just begging his dad the whole time, Dad, I want to make this horror film. I need to make this horror film. And his dad was like, I hate horror movies. This is disgusting. It'll never work. Like,
so glad that Senior actually went for it in the end, because Jesus Christ, like they are the starting point of horror when it comes to modernizing it, at least. But yeah, the backdrop. Talking about cuts that they made, the backdrops that were painted. They were just paint-ons. Everything. It's very much like a Disney movie. Yeah.
So they painted it all on the glass, and then they shot like the scene of the carriages, but behind that was also paint, like painted scenery as well. So it was like layers upon layers upon layers, and I think they did a good job with today's eyes. You see it, but
yeah, if you're watching that in 4K like I did, you're seeing everything. But it's very much like Disney, like how Disney did their animation. It was just a backdrop and cells upon cells upon cells. It's no different than that. So I didn't see any issue with how they actually did the set of it, given that animation does it even today. But I understand when I was reading about the crash and everything and how the massive effect that they had on it, this movie probably should never have been made.
No, not really. Not in the grand scheme of things, no.
But it did.
And it made 14 million in the Depression. So that's no feat. We're talking the majority of movies during COVID were making, the first, I think the first few that they released did really, really well, but towards sort of middle end of lockdowns, they were making 20 million. just through like home streaming.
Yeah.
So that's not a lot of difference compared to an actual stock market crash where everything becomes worthless.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't in that state. We were all still in a state where we still had consumerism and we were still able to binge these things and do stuff, and our money was still worth money, whereas back then nothing was worth anything.
Exactly. It's just crazy. It is absolutely crazy. Going back to Bela and what this movie actually did for his career, and not to go into too much detail because like it's so fascinating when you're looking into the next movies that he did, but he very much typecast himself after this.
And do you know why he wouldn't accept to do the second? Because they originally wanted to make a sequel to this, like an official sequel. So not Dracula 2, but, it wasn't going to be a spin-off like Son of Dracula or Dracula. Mm-hmm. This was going to be like the official sequel. And he didn't want to do it because he didn't want to be typecast.
And he actually was.
Yeah.
And the thing that everyone thinks that we know that as going through these episodes that Lon Chaney, not Junior, not this guy, Lon Chaney was going to be the face of Universal. But a lot of people also think Boris Karloff was the face or going to be the whole structure of Universal Monsters. Not the fucking case at all. Because after Lon Chaney, once this movie is being done, all eyes are on Bela Lugosi. Yeah. And Bela gets offered everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Bela does his second big mistake of his life or career. He turns down one of the most, if not the most iconic. It is even our image. It is even on our official posters and everything. Frankenstein. He turned down Frankenstein. And why?
No, I'll let you say this one. Go on.
Yeah, he had no lines.
Yeah, he didn't feel it was becoming of an actor of his
standard,
grandeur. Yeah. It's the theatre. It's a theatre.
It's
person in him.
Such a shame because the way that I was looking at it was like the reason Dracula works for is because of his performance.
Yes,
he is performing he is on 100. And if he could have taken that 100 and put it into Frankenstein, it would have still worked. But he couldn't because he couldn't get around the fact that his performance doesn't just come from him talking in Dracula. It's his facial expressions. It's his movement. And he couldn't even, like that. And he couldn't even think that he could translate that into Frankenstein because there was no words. Yet Boris Karloff did it seamlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And Boris then becomes the Universal's it boy because Boris says yes. Boris says please. Boris says thank you. Boris will do whatever it is you ask of him. But Bela will question it.
And do you know why? It is purely, Boris, I don't think Boris had done much theatre prior to being in the movies. He was a British kid, emigrated, and fell into movies at a young age. Do you know when I mean a young age? He was like, it wasn't all about being famous for Boris. That wasn't the thing. It wasn't the I must give the best performance of my life every time the camera turns on. But that's what it was for Bela. Every performance he ever does, even the gypsy. Everything has to be just right. And that's why people didn't like working with Bela, because they said he was a method actor, which meant that he, for those of you that don't know, it's called the Stanislavski theory. He was basically, he lived as the character in front of everybody when he was off screen and on screen, because he didn't want to break the dynamic. He wanted them to think he was that person. He wanted them to fear them. And a lot of actors use that approach even today.
Daniel Day-Lewis is very, very famous for it.
Yeah, quite a few actors really don't like to socialise with other cast members if they're being like the bad guy, because they feel it will take their genuine reactions away when they're filming and things like that, which makes perfect sense to me. But back then, that it was rude. It was really
especially
rude.
with him swooshing his cape around everyone's face when he was walking past them. I see where he's coming from. I wouldn't have minded. I would have thought it was absolutely brilliant. But you're right, Karloff was very much for the money in the nicest way possible. Like, he loved the work he was doing. It's just he had a family. He had to pay for it. And when they did an interview with Boris's daughter and Bella's son,
Yes.
and they both said exactly the same thing. Their fathers were two very different people. Boris was a tea-loving Englishman, and Bela was a Hungarian wine-drinking, cigar-smoking guy.
Excess man. Yeah.
Very different, two different, and a romantic as well. And that is very much the performances that you get every time with Bela. Sorry, I keep changing his name all the time. His name is Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
But because of the way that we look at it, we say Bella, and I'm getting so used to saying Bella when in actual fact it's Bela.
Yeah, I heard Christopher Lee pronounce it.
Did he say Bela?
Yeah, Bela Lugosi is his official
Lugosi
pronunciation.
Yeah, it's Lugosi is where he's from.
Yeah, they dumbed it because they said that the Americans didn't like the. And I'm going to use this term, and it's like, I hate the term, but I can't think of a nicer way to say it. They didn't like the foreign connotations. They didn't think that their brains could fathom, to be able to pronounce Bela Lugosi. For God's sake, it's not difficult, but racism, 30s, there we are.
So I'm sorry if I'm flicking between the two. I've watched a lot of documentaries where people have said we're just going to go with Bella because it's just what we are so used to seeing. But a lot of people get very angry. Christopher Lee probably would be one of them because he is very much about pronunciation and making sure that words are said properly. If anyone watches anything to do with his work with Lord of the Rings and Tolkien, he is a stickler for shit like that. So he would have pronounced it completely and utterly Bela. So sorry, there might be a little Bela tangent there. I just realised I was doing it.
Well, no, Christopher Lee was such a fan. He had a replica ring made of Bela's ring. The little signet ring he wears. And he wore it.
They got a red stone in it or something.
That was the Dracula ring. But there was a signature ring that he used to wear, a signet ring, that Bela used to wear all the time. And he used to wear it on his little finger. So when you watch the Hammer horror movies, he wears it, Christopher Lee, in the Hammer horror movies.
It's not, do you know, I have never, ever watched one Hammer horror movie.
They're different. As a country, we sometimes can't knock things on the head too well. We don't quite take it to that place. And Hammer horror, I love it. It's an institution, a British institution. Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, the people that have come out of that, you cannot even, I'm not putting it down by any stretch of the imagination. But if you watch some of them, they just come across as a bit carry on now when you watch them back. They have that sort of flair where they're so camp, it kind of almost hits comedy on some of them. They don't sit well with the horror aspect.
I totally get what you mean because I'm not a fan of Carry On films. I never was. I never got that side of our comedy. There's some things I love British comedy. I love a lot of British comedy. I think we can do things very fucking funny. But there's some things that I can't get away with, and Carry On was one of them. I just am not a fan at all.
I think the thing is with Hammer, it is very serious. It's not supposed to be comedic in any way. And I mean, I'm looking at it with today's eyes. When I first saw some of the movies, they were like, it was like, oh, he's a creepy vampire. But the difference between Christopher Lee's Dracula and the difference between Bela's Dracula was teeth. Bela never had the pointed teeth. Not once did you see him bite a woman's neck and leave the marks. They are just nude to the marks. You never see the pointed teeth at all in that film. So where that came from was originally the Bram Stoker book, the teeth. Hence why this is it's a weird one, but Bram Stoker, the book flopped. It mega
it
flopped.
did, didn't it?
However, the book has never been out of print since 1897. That book has never been out of print.
Wow.
Which is 127 years. I mean, that's a long time to keep a book in print. Imagine having a first edition copy of that. Ooh.
Bloody yeah.
But the issue with that was that once that book came out, there was 2 movies that predated the Universal movie.
Yeah.
You had Dracula's Death, which was a Hungarian movie. And then you had the German movie that we all know about, which was Nosferatu.
Yes.
With Max Schreck. Now, that is a piece of
art.
Cinema gold. It's a silent movie, not a talkie, and it is based on Dracula. Now, what they didn't do was get the rights for the book,
right?
So they got sued by Bram Stoker's people. And the studio went into administration, had to shut down because they were sued so badly over the making of Nosferatu because they didn't seek the rights or permission to use a vampire.
They didn't even use the name.
No, but it literally broke the movie studio. So they originally thought that Nosferatu and Dracula's Death were both what they call forgotten movies, which are ones that don't survive. There's no copy. You never hear of it ever again. But they did find, obviously, we know that they found Nosferatu because it's been released and everything. And I've got my little fella there, my little Nosferatu.
And going to be re-released, redone, and released in October. I'm actually quite looking forward to it, I'm not going to lie. I
know he will do a good job.
Yeah, if you don't know,
Bill Skarsgård.
Yes, Bill.
Yeah. I'm not... I want to see some originality. I am one of these people. I'm not a fan of remakes, reboots, redos. However, I will give them a chance because I always think to myself, there could be that one that comes along that could completely surprise me. Like with Black Christmas, the remake and the redo. It worked. It worked. Yeah. However, this is I think it came out 1920 something, so 1921 I want to say. Nosferatu came out, it was around about then.
I thought it was later than that.
It might have been a bit later. I didn't write down the year, but it was in the 1920s, so it predates the actual Dracula movie itself.
I have a Google right here.
It might have been 1928. I've got 21 or 28 in my head. I could be completely wrong for both of those, which I probably am. But
no, what did you say?
21 or 28?
22.
Oh, well, close. There we go. No biscuit.
Oh, gosh, I'm very bright. That's what Google says.
Yeah, so, I mean, the book itself has had a lot of stick. And like I said, it was a flop, but it only started picking up a bit of steam once the 1931 movie had come out from Universal, because obviously people were intrigued and they wanted to read more about it. So then it started to pick up steam and people were more interested and book sales went through the roof to do with it. But at that point, Bram Stoker had already passed away. Bram Stoker had died in 1912 and he didn't get to see any of this. He didn't get to see any movies, success of his book or anything. But they also thought...
Oh, thank you for continuing, because...
They also thought that he had... everybody thinks that Bram Stoker is the guy that invented Dracula. They think he's the guy that took the legend of Vlad the Impaler and made it a mainstream story, because obviously we all know about the Vlad the Impaler. But what actually happened was there was 2 books that predated Bram Stoker's Dracula that were about vampires. One was in 1819, so we're talking that long ago, 1819, and it was called The Vampire. The second one was in 1872, and that was called Carmilla, and they were both stories about vampires seducing
women,
the world.
The world. We won't start small, kids. We'll go for the world.
But, like giving off the idea. But however, they just didn't have that same romanticism that I think Bram Stoker's had. I mean, he was just some little weird Irish guy from Dublin that he had a mysterious illness up until the age of 7 that left him bedridden. He didn't get out of bed for his first 7 years of his life, Bram Stoker.
Wow.
They still don't know. Well, they never knew what it was because obviously the 1800s a bit all. But
I mean, he's lucky that he lived as long as what he did. I have never found an interest in Bram Stoker at all. Like I've never Dracula. I hate to say this. Dracula is not one of my favorites.
Yes.
Even though, and I pointed this out before, my phone case is the Dracula cover, which I find absolutely beautiful. But it's because they didn't have the Frankenstein one. So I bought that one instead. But yes, I don't know what it is about Dracula that I just do not find appealing. However, doing research for this, I have found Bela more interesting. And with that comes Dracula. I feel like them two come hand in hand.
I feel like when Bram Stoker was writing it, he took into consideration a lot of factors that I don't think maybe the two books that predated it did. He did research on all the Serbian and Old Russian folklores and to do with the upia, which is the Russian old Russian name for vampire. Upia.
Oh,
and it's basically in Serbia before there was a massive war. I can't remember. I didn't write down what year it was, but there was a huge war where Serbia was in the middle, and the two countries either side went at it, and it was a culture shock for the two countries that fought in Serbia because when they were in the little villages, they were seeing the little village folklore customs and the strange things that they were doing in their burial rituals and stuff like that. They would bury the dead with a full casket of garlic. They would tie the bells to the toes and have on the headstones because they were worried they were going to reanimate. Like we had it over here in case you buried someone alive.
It originated from Italy. It was
the plague thing, wasn't it? Like
it
they
was
were worried buried or something.
Yeah, but it was Italy who kind of oh god, you should see how many systems came in place for this type of thing with the rope on the toe or on the hand.
Yeah.
What they used to do in Italy, which is where it kind of originated from, the idea of it all came from, was they would leave them in the morgue for at least a couple of weeks, and they would leave them with their hand on the bell, and they would just, obviously it's a freezer room, so if people just up and left it, they would just pile their dead in there, and if bells started ringing, they would start coming in. But there was so many systems made. I hate that I have researched this. Where they would have actual pulley systems in place to be able to allow the person to get out themselves, or to be able to communicate, like with a pipe going up, and they would have oxygen coming in, and it is crazy the lengths that they went to over that.
Yeah, I mean, the two countries were very, very, either side of Serbia were like taken aback by, their customs. And one of the biggest custom, which is where they think that this originated from, and I have got it written down here. The story started in the 11th century to do with vampires, right? Predates Christianity, the vampire law. So I'm not saying there's truth in it. I'm just saying there's something going on there. But the biggest thing that used to happen was when they buried their dead, they'd not bury them 6 feet like we do. That's a new concept. They'd just throw a bit of dirt over the top. So obviously when the body started to bloat, it looked like they were coming out of the dirt, like they'd been up and they'd walked around, so they thought. So when they used to, as horrible as it sounds, they used to not clean the body, but dust the body down. They'd see blood coming out of the mouths because decomp.
It's fluid.
Decomp. Yes,
a lot of it.
With today's eyes, decomp. But the scared old little baba yagas, the little old ladies, the old bubbers, would think, oh my God, they've been up and they've eaten something and they've drunk some blood, and that's in their head. They were like, the dead are walking. So
that's crazy. That, like, I have learned. I watch a lot of programs on death, and I read a lot of books as well. At the moment, I'm reading about funeral arrangements and how different they are all across the world, and it's so interesting how from we are so in America is exactly the same. It's such a business. Death is such a business, and in the rest of the world, it is life. It is celebration. It is a party. It's so sad that we have that, and that's what I'm reading at the moment. But again, it was when saying business, death were the whole funeral arrangements and embalming and everything does come from America.
Yeah.
They created it all, and it was all money.
Well, that's the thing, because embalming didn't take place back then. It's more of a modern practice.
It's very much late 1800s, maybe.
Yeah,
it
so
might be a bit earlier. I can't remember.
in a little village in Serbia, it wasn't sort of the first thing that they thought, oh, yeah, this person's dead. Let's drain all their fluids and pump them full of this alcohol, poison.
But they wouldn't.
Pickle,
No, that's not. And I look. Do you know what? My mind is like totally blown, and I think it's probably because of like the path that I'm on reading wise at the minute. I'm like, oh my god, that's so interesting. Yeah. But yeah, that makes so much sense. Like, of course they would think that. Okay, mind blown.
they just didn't have the knowledge. That's the thing. And back in the 11th century, you wouldn't. So
no,
there would be these rumors of these people that would get out from the grave and they would be alive and they would eat things and people, because back then cattle would go missing. And people would go missing back in the day. They could have just up and moved.
Yeah,
the cattle could have been stolen for food, but no, it was clearly that dead body of that person that had blood trickling out of their mouth.
Has to be.
So
I mean, let's be honest. If I was living in them times, like hysteria would have taken over. I would have been the one. That would have been me. I'd have totally believed it. I am so gullible. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it genuinely surprised me when I was reading about all that sort of the origins of how they looked into it. But the fact that it predates Christianity, to me, that was like, oh my god, I didn't think. I mean, every town has its folklores.
Yeah,
for something to last as long as it has from the 11th century to now, the stories, because there's still little villages in Romania that still practice the bell system to this day.
Wow, I thought it was like a thing well past now. I mean, bloody hell, the graveyard in Scotland, Greyfriars Bobby. That is a graveyard upon a graveyard upon a graveyard upon a graveyard. I could keep on going. Yeah. But it is literally it was part of the plague. Mary's Queen of Scots. Dead was all slumped in there. The plague victims were all slumped in there, and they were literally just buried upon, buried upon, buried upon. Like, Edinburgh is so deep, and that graveyard is just as deep. And then you've got the more recent residents sitting on the top. We've
been there quite a few times, and we stay in the Grass Market, which is where Greyfriars is.
Beautiful place.
And we've done a couple of walks around Greyfriars, and we've also been down into Mary Queen of Scots.
Yeah.
Into the catacombs and the tunnels and stuff like that. So it is an eye opener. But yeah, it's just crazy to me to think that in the 1800s he had the ability to find this information out back then. I mean, the research he must have done, because he also then went into Vlad Tepes, which we all know is Vlad the Impaler, which he got his name through.
Not a very nice man.
No, but he has a nice castle which I want to go to one day.
I think my auntie has been. My auntie did a retirement tour and went off to Transylvania, went off to Romania, went off and did. And she's not, I would never say she is essentially like a horror fan. It's just more out of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's done all them, and she said it was absolutely stunning. You can't put into words what you're looking at.
We were going to go for my 40th, but obviously COVID hit. So
God damn you, COVID.
Yeah, bastard. But what made me laugh, changing the subject a little bit, was when we said about like how Bela turned down doing it because he didn't want to be typecast.
Yeah.
It was the same with Helen Chandler, who played Mina. she didn't want to keep playing the damsel in distress in movies, so she didn't want to take the second one. And also, the funniest quote I've ever heard from something back then was the guy Edward Van Sloan, who played Van Helsing, wrote a letter to his nephew, and he quoted the movie as being overplayed, overwritten, and altogether lousy. That's what he thought about the film.
Wow. But it's so funny that you mention her, because the guy who played Renfield was exactly the same. He didn't want to be typecast, and yet he was for the rest of his career. He was essentially Renfield, it just in different forms.
Yeah, as in Igor, but he wasn't called Igor in that. He was called something else, wasn't he? I've gone blank on what his name was in Frankenstein. But Dwight Frye plays the most crazy. I mean, to use crazy, that PC term these days, I don't know, but just the look of intensity that guy could get out of his eyes.
The scene where he's walking towards the camera, and it's not like he's looking at it, like he's looking through it, and he's looking at you.
Yeah, and it's the extent of his madness from the minute he goes in on the coach to sit down and talk to him about, you know, his affairs and be the sensible guy, or the Jonathan Harker Keanu Reeves character gets kind of mashed into Renfield in the Bram Stoker, the Gary Oldman one. But in this, Renfield and Jonathan are two separate different people. But the way he goes there, and you can see him, he's very well put together. And he's talking to Bela as he's coming down the stairs, and he's like, "Oh, blah blah blah. You know, I'm here to do your affairs for was it Claire Fax Abbey? Something Fax Abbey, wasn't it? Where in Whitby, basically, he talks about Whitby Abbey, and he sits down with him, and you can see he's just a very well put together gentleman. And then as the film goes on, you just see his descent into madness. It's like it goes from the point of where the look of intensity on his face. I don't think I've seen anyone pull off that level of madness apart from Willem Dafoe. He has that same.
That is so crazy, because what I was going to ask earlier on was about this whole Nosferatu thing, and Bill Skarsgård playing him. I genuinely thought Willem Dafoe was playing him. In my head, I thought Willem Dafoe was playing him because
he's Van Helsing.
But he would be perfect for it. I've just nearly knocked my camera over and everything. But he would be perfect for it. It's just because I just think he's got such a face for I think such a face for horror.
Yeah, he really does. He plays for me the equivalent. Okay, I know it's not a bloody good movie and it's not got like reviews, but Spider-Man, where he plays a Green Goblin, even in No Way Home, when you watch him even 20 years later from doing it with Tobey Maguire to doing it in No Way Home, he has not lost that nut job. That's not PC, is it, Danielle? No, but you know that descent into madness where he's talking to the mask like it's a separate part of him, and he's still got that look on his face, which he doesn't do in any other film.
No,
it is that the same intensity level as Dwight Frye, but I mean, I hold Dwight Frye as like.
It wasn't until today.
He's the standout for me in that film. To be honest.
Totally. I mean, Lugosi for so many other reasons. Take the iconicism out of it. His performance is absolutely perfect. Yeah. Like his mannerisms. He has how we know Dracula now. Yeah. And if you hadn't seen this movie and then you go back, you're like, oh yeah, I get it. That he was. I mean, he obviously originated it, but he got it. But it does not take away from that intense level that he gives as oh my god, I forget his name. Sorry, my brain is just like a mush at the moment. What's his name? Renfield.
Yeah, Renfield, yeah.
Yes, Renfield. Oh my god. I was watching this documentary, and it's something I never even noticed is literally where he is crawling towards the camera, and I'm like, holy shit, like please stop. Like just go away. Because it's so intense. His face it's magical. It is absolutely magical to look at. I could not watch this movie again, by the way. I watched it last year. That was fucking enough. So I have done everything else but watch this movie for this.
I think it's a lot to be said, though. In 1931, middle of the Depression, The movie's been made. They market it at the box office, and this is where it originated. So the research suggests, this nonsense that you get now when you watch something on Netflix or a film comes out and people walk out of the cinema or they faint because it's too much for them to watch. So you get that kind of mass hysteria around a movie.
Yeah.
Well, this is where it originated.
Really?
Dracula was genuinely the movie where this genuinely happened. It wasn't like a marketing ploy like they use it now. It was the genuine thing. Women were fainting in the cinemas because it was unlike anything they'd ever seen.
Yeah, I read about that.
And they marketed. Then the journalists, all the journalists used it to their advantage. And then Universal hooked on to the fact that it was a good marketing ploy. So when they started pushing the film, because films were in the cinema for a long time back in the day, it wasn't just
not like
a
now.
month run. It was like they'd be in there for a good 6 months, the movies. And this one was like, you must see it. You'll pass out. You could possibly faint. And it intrigued so many people.
Just to see if they would.
They went, they paid their like 50 cents or 25 cents or whatever it was and went and watched the movie just to see if they could pass out,
I'm not going to lie, I'd probably be one of those people.
I would, yeah. And then I walked out going, that was a load of shit.
Well, I'm still waiting for that movie now to do that to us, in all honesty. I'm waiting for that movie that's going to scare the living shit out of us to like where I could physically, like, I remember someone who, when they watched The Ring, they had to sleep with the light on. They put drapes over their telly. I have never had that experience apart from Dolls. Oh, there she is. When
they redid it in, when did it? They brought it out again, 1990 something.
Was it when they? Sorry for anyone listening on audio. Dan has just flashed me her Regan t-shirt. It's amazing. I think I have that one in short sleeve.
This is a big sweater. It's an oversized jumper.
I think I have her face. I can't wear it when I go to my mother-in-law's. My mother-in-law is one of the people who went to see it when it originally came out and had to leave because of how much it affected her. But did they do that in the 90s for when it actually, because they took it off view, like you weren't able to buy it or anything? It kind of came like a banned movie, didn't it? Yeah,
because I went to see it at the cinema by myself.
Amazing.
When it was re-released, and it gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Really?
It wasn't the film. As in the storyline, a girl gets possessed by a devil, blah, 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 or a demon, or whatever you read into it, because everybody says it's something different. But it was the atmosphere that came with the movie. It was that feeling when you watch it on the big screen. You don't get it from when you watch it on the TV.
I've never actually seen it.
If you get a chance, it's this horrible anticipation.
I could have just flashed that. It's my mouse mat.
It was the pure silence. Everybody knew what was coming because everybody's seen the film. But it was like this, like I say, it was the anticipation. It was like a static in the air. And I walked out of that cinema and I checked the back seat of my car for the first time ever.
Really?
And I'm not one of those people.
You are not.
I was 17, 18, I think, when it came back out again, around that age. And all that night, it just stayed with me, that whole like really uncomfortable feeling, and you couldn't wash it off. You just couldn't shake it. And I knew my rational brain was going, it's just a film. You're not watching it now. But my brain was going, but I just still had that ick, that real, I don't know what the word is. It just stayed with me.
Yeah, I've had movies stay with me for many reasons. Probably because I'm just questioning them in my head. What have I just watched? But I've never had that one movie. See, I always reference the first horror that I watched that scared the ever living shit out of us, which was Dolly Dearest. And I know the effect it had on me now because I could not own baby dolls. But I couldn't tell you the feeling that I had at that time. I generally can't remember because as soon as I realized that nothing was happening, I wanted more. And that's where my journey of horror starts, is right there at about 8-year-old. But I've never come close in my adult life to being like, oh, that's got us. And Demons might Dario Argento's Demons had a little, because if you've not seen Demons, oh, you've got to. It has one of the best movie soundtracks. Saxon fucking playing through it. It's brilliant. But the ending, I'm breathing. I'm breathing. We're over it. The credits are rolling. This is it. They got out. They're on the truck. Everything's fine. Movie's not fucking over.
Yeah.
The attack is not fucking over. And I sat there for ages in absolute shock.
He has a knack. I think it's a lot to do with the cinematography in both those, in The Exorcist and obviously in this one. How they film it. With The Exorcist, for me, it felt very much ahead of its time in respect of that. It felt a bit like a documentary, even though it wasn't a documentary, because these seemed like real people, and they
fly on the wall. Like,
it seemed like a real thing that was happening. And the use of sound, where they'd pump up the volume on certain things, and then for a long time it was very, very quiet, and there was a lot of dialogue, but it was very monotonal, and then all of a sudden something would happen, and it would like, it'd jar you. And I feel like Dario was a master of that himself as well, and taking something that was beautiful and making it really ugly. He was so good at doing that. So, I mean, I have met him, and I did have a conversation with him once. He doesn't speak English. He had a translator. I didn't know it was Dario Argento at the time. Because he came to HorrorCon at Sheffield many years ago.
Wow.
And he came up, and I think it was the first year we sponsored it. So we're going back 2018, maybe before then. Someone will know that's watching this. And he came up and had a conversation. He was like, do you have anything from this movie, that movie? And I was like, no, they're really hard to get hold of, like any kind of any kind of merchandise to do with that, because I don't think there's an IP out there. I don't know if they can get hold of it. And then as he walked away, the translator came back and went, that's Dario Argento. I went, what? Oh, I wondered who the Italian man was, but I didn't like to say, just in case. It's like,
I love that story.
Me putting my foot in it as usual, but
it's a truthful matter, because when it comes to his movies, there is not a great he's a very niche director, and there's not a lot of merch out. The only thing that comes to my recollection is Killstar doing a range last year or year before.
I've got one of the shirts, I
know Killstar did. Killstar have got a new campaign coming out, which I'm so fucking excited for. My husband even saved the leaflet for us when he bought me Christmas presents from them. Twin Temple. Fucking cannot wait.
Let's have a satanic orgy.
Oh, I'm gonna. Have we got any more about Dracula?
Yes. Did you know that when they were filming it, and I don't know whose decision this was, whether it was Todd's, whether it was the studios, or whether it was Bela's, he doesn't blink once. From a documentary I watched today, he made the decision not to blink because he wanted the dead wouldn't blink. Yeah, no, that's true. They don't need to re-moisturize their eyeballs, do they?
No. No. And that was the decision he made. When it comes to all the characteristics of Dracula, it all comes from him. Yeah, when they say like he was invested, fully invested. Todd Browning did not die. That's just, it's one documentary I saw where they mentioned it.
The other thing that I feel a bit sorry for him, because as you well know, he was the nation's god for a little while, and then he just could not get cast in anything for a long period of time. No. However, after he died, they managed to get a star on the Walk of Fame for him. And where it ended up is so bloody unfortunate. I've seen it. I've been there. It's literally right across from the Scientology building. On the Hollywood train. It's there. The building is there. Mm-hmm. Bela's is literally just as you cross over towards it. Now, I've walked up that road and they all look like they're wearing Blockbuster uniforms, if you can remember what the light blue shirt was with the chinos. Yeah, so you avoid them, you cross the road and you walk past Bela. So in a way, it's a good thing because you get to see a star.
You get to see him.
But yeah, I highly would not recommend going down that end of the town. And it's not the greatest part. Where Bela's is, you start to go into downtown so that you've got all the tents, the shanty tents, towns.
It's
very, very unfortunate that's
they cost a lot of money. They and that probably would have had to be fundraised because we will go into Bela's life in another episode, but he did not come out on top financially because you know he made some really bad choices. And when I was saying Anth earlier, it's so sad talking about him because I just feel heartbroken for him because of the passion that he had. Ed Wood, the movie done by Tim Burton. Someone, was it Martin Landau? Why did I want to say Frank Langella? Why the fuck did I want to say Frank Langella for? But yes, Martin Landau.
He plays him, doesn't he? It's scary.
There was someone in a documentary. Who was it? And I don't know why. Oh my god, the guy from Trading Places. What's his name? I've got it written down here because we did the other day. Ralph Bellamy. He kept appearing in a lot of the documentaries I was watching, and I was meant to go back and find out why, because I don't know if he was a fan or if he was actually, because he did a ton of movies. I think he did 109 before he, no, I can't remember the actual figure. 99. He did 99 movies before he did, as he was doing Trading Places. And I was thinking, God, if he's done 99 movies, could he have potentially have been a part of that era? But he was the one who mentioned it. It was him. Now I can't remember what we were talking about.
Just Bela and like his star, but like
that's it.
That's another thing, because obviously stars are dependent on where they are on the Walk of Fame.
Yeah,
they have the estate pays for the star, so they pay for one amount. Right. They then pay a rental system on the position of the star.
Okay.
Family or the estate are then liable for the upkeep of the star.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a one-off payment and you get your star, or it's not like the city of California of LA goes, have a star. No, millions of dollars goes into buying a star. So you see these people going, I've got my star on the Walk of Fame. They've paid for that, and they will continue paying for that well after they're dead. Their estate will have to pay for that, or they dig it up and take it away.
Yeah.
It's that savage. It is that savage, the Walk of Fame.
It's not great. But no, what I was saying, Ed Wood, that was it.
Yeah.
So Martin Landau, it was Ralph Bellamy who said, when you watch him play him, you think to yourself, shit, is he come back from the dead?
Yeah.
Because of how good he was. However, there is a lot of characteristics that have not of Bela that his family have been quite vocal about. The swearing. Bela was not a swearer. He was a gentleman. Obviously, which we will go into, the feud with Boris Karloff. Oh, the most famous line, or my most favorite line, I should say, from Ed Wood is Karloff, fuck you. Yes, that is.
I can see that playing in my head when you said that.
The limey cocksucker. I fucking love that line. But it's a work of fiction, just like a lot of Hollywood feuds were, and it is something that we will go into one day. The funeral.
Yes, it was a choice of his family, not his wishes, which I find bizarre. Because, that's what everybody knew him for. But if you were going to have a photographer at an open coffin take a photo of said person in the cape, in the coffin, which they did as well, which I found very strange. But grief is what it is, and people cope in different ways. It's not for me to judge You've got to think it's so old Hollywood to do that. Yeah,
I mean, he died in the 1950s. That time it wasn't really looked upon, but in the 20s and 30s, the era he was coming up in, it was very much a thing to have photographers. Look at Rudolph Valentino's funeral.
Yeah, no,
Very highly photographed. A lot of, oh God, who was it? Oh, one of his girlfriends kept doing a fainting act every 2 minutes, and that's what got the photographers to stay. But that's what they did. It was publicity.
yeah.
And so I can kind of understand in that stretch, but yeah, it was no. He did not in Ed Wood. In the movie, you see him looking for caskets. He didn't do that. He was very much scared of death. He wanted to live. Surprisingly, with his habits, he wanted to live.
Yeah, because I've literally been past the apartment. Like, I went on the Dearly Departed tour many a time when I've been in LA, and they drive you past, and you pause outside of 50. I think it's 56020 Harold Way, which is where his apartment was.
What a memory!
And sometimes things stick in there. Numbers always do. But yeah, he was found unresponsive by his fifth wife at the time, and her name was Hope. And she was the one who he accredited to getting him out of his addiction spiral that he was in at the time. Obviously, we'll go more into all that when we eventually get around to doing Bela. But there is a photo on the internet of them taking Bela out of the apartment. He's blanketed, you don't see anything, but what you do see is the one thing that he held most dear to him, which was a floor-to-ceiling painting, oil painting that someone did of him with a bowler hat in his hand and a coat over his arm. And it was this massive, great big painting, but he took it to every house, and it was the one thing he refused to sell.
Yeah.
Of all of his goods, no matter how poor he was, he refused to sell this painting. That was his.
Yeah.
And the sad thing was, in this photo you see the picture as they're wheeling him out, and they caught that one image, and it was just like, wow. That was, yeah, it was weird, because it was just like he's in two places at once, because the oil painting was so fantastic.
His life, I mean, there was a rumor that he was in such a bad place that Frank Sinatra paid for his funeral. It's not true.
No, it's not.
It was his
money towards it.
It was his fifth and fourth wife who paid for it.
Yeah.
But he put money towards his rehabilitation.
That was it. I knew he put money to something, because they told me on the tour that he paid for his funeral, and it wasn't until I looked into it recently, just now, that I found out he didn't. No. But he did give him money for his rehab, because he was worried about him, and they had been passing friends, but
they weren't like friendly. They were just like passing acquaintances. And I think Frank Sinatra had a bit of a soft spot for him.
Frank did. If he liked you, you were set for life with Frank Sinatra. Yeah. He was one of those people, he would go above and beyond to help somebody if he felt they needed it, or if he liked you. But if you got on the wrong side of him, cool. But
we should. Sorry,
he's one and all. He was my grandfather's like all-time favorite.
He again is an incredibly interesting man.
Really interesting and very complex, and by today's standard, a bit gross if we look into it. But that's another time.
Yeah, taking the personal side of it, he was a fucking brilliant actor as well. Just. He could sing, he could act, he could be an arsehole. What was I going to say?
I will say that I do think there's lots of people that have played Dracula since the inception of the very first movie. So we'll go back to the Hungarian movie and Nosferatu, because they're roughly in the same time era that they came out. So from those movies to this movie, to then the 200 movies that have gone on.
I didn't even count.
Yeah, as there actually states there's over 200 movies been made to do with Dracula including my favourite, Billy the Kid versus Dracula.
How the fuck did I not know about this?
Yeah, I don't need to know the plot line. I'm just going to guess there was guns involved, and Billy wins. But when you think to yourself, wow, they were scraping the barrel at the end on that one. I don't even think.
That was reaching.
That really was. But I will say, one of my favourite actors to have played, Bela aside, Christopher Lee aside, and Martin Landau, whether you can really count him because it was only like a bit part.
Yeah.
But those three aside, and obviously Gary Oldman, would be. Now, have you seen the BBC adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula?
I most certainly have.
I love Klaus Kasper Bang.
Wow.
For a Danish actor to sound more British than most British
Than
men.
me.
Yeah, he was the right amount of everything for me. He gave off humor. He gave off that's not sex appeal because that's not what it is. He gave off that,
but it kind of is. It's like that romantic,
the
sexy...
romanticism-y thing.
Yeah,
everything was a learning moment, and you could see when he was acting, he was working everything out. The more they went through the years, you could see him learn and work out how to adapt to every situation.
Yeah.
But you'd watch it in his eyes, it would dawn on him. And for a guy that English is not his first language, he's Danish.
I actually didn't know he was Danish.
I think he plays for me one of the most seductive Draculas in all of them. But I mean, it always comes down to personal taste. Everybody automatically goes to Gary Oldman out of all of them. But he's their sexy Dracula, isn't he? Because he's like steampunky Victorian.
Yeah, top hat.
It's the whole.
I see it.
You know, so, and he goes through and we're not talking old Mr. Burns version of Dracula. We're talking top hat, tiny glasses, that Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
That's everybody's their first go-to. Whereas there's something about Klaus that was very reminiscent of Bela, but he had a very modern take on it, even though it was still supposedly based in the Carfax Abbey. That's what it was called. Yes. It was based in the right time. But him, I don't think anybody's. When you say Dracula, he is always the first.
Yeah.
He's the first that comes to mind, without a shadow of a doubt. His face is the first face I think of when someone says Dracula.
Instantly.
So therefore, his job is done. He just wasn't around long enough to realise his worth, because Universal didn't realise the worth of their old movies until way later after he passed away.
And it was too late. And we will explore more with Bela, sorry. I'm going to just start calling him by how it's meant to be said. I know, and it's nothing to anyone who says Bela. It's just, I'm so used to hearing people saying Bela now.
I'll just chop and change whatever comes out my mouth. I'm sorry.
Honest, you're right. I'm probably going to be the same. But yeah, we will explore into Bela's life alongside the relationship he had with Karloff, because it is not the big Hollywood feud that it was being made out to be, because there was a time when that was all the range, and they turned out to be nothing but, well, we just didn't see eye to eye on something. We got over it. We moved on. It's, there's no big fight here yet. This is one of them, but there is a beautiful way of being able to link them to get to a movie that, when I saw a clip of it today, instantly went, I need to see it, because I have never been so taken back by just listening to Karloff as him, with no makeup on, and just be him acting. And it was Black Cat. Watching them two powerhouses act side by side was incredible. So we will be exploring that at some point. But not next week.
We got a long bloody list, people. So
season 2 is gonna be it next week. Yes. Do you want to tell the people what next week is?
Yeah, a big ball of goo from outer space.
We're going
blob.
We're going all extraterrestrial.
Ish.
Gooey.
Very sticky.
Yes, we are doing the blob. Something different. I feel like season 2 we need to be a bit more adventurous, and the blob is definitely adventurous.
It's a blob.
It is a blob. I always remember it from Grease. It's the movie that's been shown when it's coming out of the cinema doors and everything. And also Steve McQueen's, but they got the dark line.
Well,
that was such a good Steve McQueen.
There was no Eleanor in this. There was no GT Ford Mustang fastback going down San Francisco hills really fast with Nicolas Cage pretending to drive it as well. No, there was none of that.
Oh gosh. Yes, so next week is The Blob.
Yes.
This has been Dracula. This has been something.
It's been our first one back. Bear with us. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and we've both been really poorly. As I said at the beginning, one still is. Can you work out which one? It's going to be funny. I think now, because like I'm fully aware, given that I do all the audio for Nerdy Up North, which includes Monsters, Trekking, and Ramblecast, that the silences don't mean nothing to them when we're just sitting laughing. So my apologies. We are back every Monday. Monster Mondays is back, 7:00. All of our audio goes up on a Tuesday, and we can be found anywhere you find your podcast from. You can now also find us on Instagram and TikTok, separate, just Monsters Up North. You can find Dan's Bleeding Marvelous on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You did some really good memes over the Christmas period, I gotta say. I enjoyed them.
Good. My effort was appreciated, even if I was dying.
Have that, people. And we will be back in full good health, one of us, next week for The Blob. So have we got anything else to add before we say goodbye, Dan?
Only goodbye, Dan.
Goodbye, Dan. And stay spooky, everyone. Bye.